The stars had always seemed so far away from Earth. Now Captain Taemin Park stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching those same stars grow closer with each passing second. His ship cut through space toward Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Confederation. After 300 years of dreaming, humanity was finally going to meet their neighbors. "Captain, we're getting signals from the station," reported his communications officer. "They want us to follow a specific flight path." Taemin nodded. Everything had to be perfect. This first meeting would decide humanity's place in the galaxy. Ambassador Ji-Eun Kim stood beside him, her face calm but her hands tight on the rail. She had spent years learning about the Confederation, studying their laws and customs. The Confederation had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Every species followed the sacred protocols, ancient laws that kept peace between the stars. Each race had their role. The smart Valanthi made the laws. The strong Chromax enforced them. The gentle Mendi healed the sick. Everyone knew their place. "Look at that," whispered engineer So Young Kang, pointing at the viewing screen. Nexus Prime filled their vision. The planet was covered in crystal towers that reached into the clouds. Ships from 100 different worlds moved in perfect order around the station. Everything looked planned, controlled, peaceful. The Soul's Pride docked without problems. Taemin, Ji-Eun, and their small team walked through corridors filled with aliens they had only seen in old radio signals. Tall, thin beings with blue skin walked next to short, furry creatures with 4 arms. Some looked like walking plants. Others seemed made of living rock. But something felt wrong. The aliens moved in straight lines. They didn't talk to each other unless they wore the same colored clothing. Everything was quiet, orderly, but somehow empty. "Welcome, humans," said a voice that sounded like singing crystal. Elder Vexithera of the Valanthi glided toward them. Her people looked like tall, graceful humans covered in scales that changed color with their thoughts. Right now, her scales showed calm blue patterns. "Thank you for meeting with us," Ji-Eun replied, bowing slightly. "We're honored to join the galactic community." "Join is not quite the right word," Vexithera said. Her scales shifted to show what humans would learn meant correction. "You will be assigned your proper place. Come." The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from dozens of species sat in organized sections. Each group wore different colored robes that showed their caste. The Valanthi in white for lawmakers, the Chromax in red for military, the Mendi in green for healers, and so on. "Humans," announced Supreme Lawgiver Quinthax, the eldest Valanthi, "you have been tested. Your species shows average intelligence, short lifespans, and no special abilities. You are classified as worker caste. You will mine asteroids, build stations, and support the important species." Ji-Eun felt her team go tense behind her. They had expected this. The Confederation judged species by simple tests. They looked at brain scans, physical strength, and natural abilities. Humans scored average in everything. "We appreciate your evaluation," Ji-Eun said carefully, "but we must decline this classification." The chamber went completely silent. Vexthera's scales flashed bright yellow. Shock. Several Chromax delegates stood up, their thick armored bodies ready for fight. Even the peaceful Mendi looked confused. "You decline?" Quinthax asked. His ancient voice carried thousands of years of authority. "No species has ever refused their proper place. The sacred protocols maintain order. Without them, there would be chaos, war, destruction." "Maybe," Ji-Eun replied. "But we didn't crawl out of caves and reach the stars by following someone else's rules." Dr. Subin, the team's scientist, stepped forward. She had been quiet during the whole meeting, watching and learning. "Elder Quinthax, may I ask a question? When was the last time a worker caste species invented something new?" "Worker caste species do not invent," replied a Chromax general. "They follow instructions. That is their nature." "And when did a military caste member write poetry? Or a healer caste discover a new star?" Subin continued. "Such things are impossible," Vexthara said. Her scales showed the purple of confusion. "Each caste has their abilities. The protocols ensure everyone does what they do best. What if you're wrong? Ji-un asked. What if the protocols don't show what species can do but only what you allow them to do? The question hung in the air like poison gas. For 3,000 years, no one had asked it. The system worked. There was peace. There was order. Why would anyone want to change that? You will accept worker caste status, Quinthax said finally. Or you will be excluded from all galactic trade, technology, and protection. You will return to your small yellow star and remain there forever. Taemin watched Ji-un's face. He knew that look. He had seen it before when she argued with Earth's politicians about the mission. She was about to do something that would change everything. Then we choose exclusion, she said. The reaction was instant. Chromax generals shouted about duty and order. Valanthi lawmakers demanded explanations. Even the gentle Mendi seemed upset. But some aliens, mostly in worker caste colors, leaned forward with interest. You choose to remain primitive? Vexithara asked. To give up medicine, faster than light, travel, energy weapons? We choose to remain free, Ji-un replied. Humans will find our own path among the stars. Later, back on their ship, Taemin's crew sat in worried silence. They had just cut humanity off from the greatest civilization in galactic history. Earth's leaders would not be happy. Do you think we did the right thing? So Young asked. Admiral. Dong-hyun Lee, who had been quiet during the meeting, finally spoke. My grandmother used to tell me a story about a bird that was offered a beautiful cage with everything it needed. Food, water, safety from predators. All it had to give up was the sky. What did the bird choose? Taemin asked. The sky, Dong-hyun said. Always the sky. As the Soul's Pride left Nexus Prime, Ji-un looked at the reports her team had gathered. The galaxy was full of species that had accepted their cages. Worker caste beings who dreamed of art but spent their lives mining. Military caste soldiers who wanted to heal instead of hurt. Healer caste members who wondered about the stars but were forbidden to explore. Maybe it was time someone taught the galaxy that cages, even beautiful ones, were still cages. Set course for the outer systems, she told Taemin. Let's go meet some birds who remember what flying feels like. The stars ahead looked different now. Not like distant lights, but like doors waiting to be opened. 6 months had passed since humanity rejected the Confederation's offer. Captain Hyejin Choi guided her trading ship, the Busan Runner, through the asteroid fields of the Kresh system. These rocks held valuable metals, but they belonged to no one. Perfect for humans who needed to make their own way. Captain, we're getting a signal, her pilot reported. It's from one of those big rock creatures. Hyejin smiled. The Quarians looked like walking mountains, but they were gentle miners, who had been marked as worker caste. They lived in the asteroids, slowly eating their way through rock and metal. The Confederation used them like living machines. This is Quarian Unit 7749, came a voice like grinding stones. You are human vessels. You should not be here. Confederation law forbids worker caste species from trading without permission. We're not Confederation, Hyejin replied. We're independent. Want to make a deal? There was a long silence. Then, deal? What is deal? That conversation changed everything. The Quarians had never been allowed to choose what they mined, or who they traded with. They just followed orders. But humans offered something new. Choice. Within weeks, word spread through the outer systems. Humans traded fairly. They shared technology. They treated everyone as equals, no matter what color robes they wore. Dr. Subin Oh worked day and night in her mobile laboratory. She studied diseases that the Confederation ignored because they only affected worker caste species. The Zephyrian plague was her biggest challenge. The insect-like Zephyrians had suffered from it for centuries. Their bodies would slowly turn to stone until they couldn't move. The Mendi won't help them, explained Zekthar, a Zephyrian trader who had lost 3 children to the plague. They say it's not worth their time. We're only worker caste. Subin felt anger burn in her chest. The Mendi were amazing healers, but they only treated important species. Worker caste beings were left to suffer. I'll find a cure, she promised. Impossible. Zekthar clicked sadly. Only healer caste can make medicine. It is the law. Then we'll break the law. Subin's laboratory ship became a beacon of hope. Worker caste species brought her samples, data, anything that might help. They weren't supposed to do science, but they were smart. They had ideas. They just needed someone to listen. Engineer So Young Kang had her own revolution happening. She took apart Confederation technology piece by piece, learning how it worked. Then she made it better. This is impossible, muttered a Valanthi scientist, who had come to see her work. Your species lacks the intelligence for such modifications. So Young looked up from the engine she was rebuilding. Maybe you just lack the imagination. The engine she was working on was a Confederation gravity drive. It used complex mathematics to bend space. But So Young had found a way to combine it with human engineering. The result was smaller, faster, and used half the energy. You cannot improve perfection, the Valanthi insisted. Watch me, So Young said and started the engine. The breakthrough moment came when Subin finally cracked the Zephyrian plague. The cure was simple once she understood it. The virus attacked calcium in their shells, so she created a treatment that strengthened their natural defenses. Commander Min Seok Yoon led the medical fleet to deliver the cure. 12 human ships, filled with medicine, headed straight for Zephyrian space. The Confederation tried to stop them. Human vessels, you are violating Galactic Protocol 847, came the message from a Chromax patrol ship. Only designated healer caste may provide medical treatment. Turn back immediately. Negative, Min Seok replied. We have medicine for dying people we're going through. You will be fired upon. Then fire. The Chromax captain hesitated. The Confederation had rules about everything, including warfare. You didn't attack medical ships, but humans weren't supposed to have medical ships in the first place. While the Chromax decided what to do, Min Seok's fleet slipped past them. They reached the Zephyrian colonies and began distributing the cure. Within days, Zephyrians who had been slowly dying began to recover. The political explosion was enormous. The Confederation Council emergency meeting lasted for days. Elder Vexathara's scales flashed angry red patterns as she spoke. The humans have violated fundamental law. They perform healer caste functions without authorization. They must be stopped. But Supreme Lawgiver Quinthax looked troubled. The Zephyrians are recovering completely. How is this possible? It doesn't matter how, General Thekmovar of the Chromax growled. They broke the law. Law is law. What, if the law is wrong? Asked a small voice from the worker caste section. Everyone turned to stare. A young Zephyrian delegate had spoken. Her name was Kliktar, and she had lost her mother to the plague. You will not speak unless asked, Quinthax said automatically. Why? Kliktar asked. Because I'm worker caste? Because I'm supposed to be too stupid to have opinions? My mother died while healer caste ignored us. Now, humans, who you say are just worker caste like me, have saved my people. Maybe the problem isn't that humans broke the law. Maybe the problem is the law itself. Silence filled the chamber. In 3,000 years, no worker caste delegate had ever questioned the system directly. More humans arrived in Confederation space every week. Captain Young-Ho Kim brought aid to struggling colonies. Captain Bo-Ra-Yu helped establish new trade routes that bypassed Confederation controls. Each human ship carried the same message. You don't have to accept the role others give you. The Quarians started creating art from the metals they mined. Beautiful sculptures that told stories of their dreams. The Confederation said it was impossible. Worker caste species couldn't be artists. The Nautari, aquatic beings designated as builder caste, began writing philosophy about the nature of existence. The Confederation said they were only supposed to construct things, not think about meaning. Small rebellions popped up across the galaxy. Species began refusing assignments that didn't match their interests. They demanded to learn new skills, to try different jobs, to think for themselves. Dr. Subin O received a secret message from a group of Mendi healers. They wanted to share their knowledge with humans. They were tired of only helping important species. So young Kang got contacted by artisan cast engineers who had been forced to build the same things for centuries. They wanted to create something new, something that had never existed before. Even some Valanthi lawmakers began asking quiet questions about whether the sacred protocols really created the best possible galaxy. The Confederation leadership watched their perfect order cracking like ice in spring. Something had to be done. Declare humanity a rogue species, Quinthax finally decided. Authorize the Chromax to bring them into compliance. Use whatever force is necessary. Admiral Dong-Hyun Lee read the declaration from his flagship. The Incheons. Thunder. He wasn't surprised. Humans had broken too many rules, inspired too many others to think for themselves. Orders, Admiral? Asked his second-in-command. Dong-Hyun looked at the reports flowing in from across human space. Dozens of species were asking for help, for protection, for the chance to choose their own paths. The galaxy was waking up from a 3,000-year sleep. Send a message to all human ships, he said. Tell them we're not backing down. The Confederation wants to put us in chains. Let them try. We'll show them what happens when you try to cage something that was born to fly. War was coming. But for the first time in galactic history, it wouldn't be about conquest or resources. It would be about the right to choose who you wanted to be. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. Or in this case, when unstoppable humans met an immovable system that had never faced anyone crazy enough to say no. The galaxy was changing, and it terrified the Confederation leaders. Reports flooded in from every sector. Species that had followed orders for thousands of years were suddenly asking questions, making demands, breaking rules. Captain Young-Ho, Kim stood on the bridge of his rescue ship, the Gwangju's Hope, watching the mining station ahead. The Grakari worked there, big, strong beings with 4 arms and thick hide, perfect for heavy labor according to the Confederation. They had been slaves for so long that most had forgotten they could be anything else. Captain, we're detecting Chromax patrol ships, his sensor officer reported. 3 of them heavily armed. Young-Ho nodded. The Confederation was cracking down hard on human activities, but some things were worth the risk. Signal the Grakari. Tell them we're here to offer them a choice. The mining station looked like a prison, gray metal buildings surrounded by force fields. The Grakari lived in small rooms and worked 18-hour shifts breaking apart asteroids. They were fed just enough to keep working. The Confederation called it efficient resource management. This is Grakari Unit Leader Braktok, came a tired voice. You should not be here, humans. The Chromax will punish us if we speak to you. They can only punish you if you let them, Young-Ho replied. We have ships, weapons, and a place for you to go. You don't have to stay here. This is our purpose. We are worker caste. We work. What if I told you that some of your people have become teachers, scientists, artists? There was a long silence. Then, that is impossible. We are not smart enough. Let me show you something. Young-Ho transmitted a video message. It showed Grakari refugees on human worlds. They were learning to read, creating sculptures with their strong hands, even working as engineers. Their natural strength made them excellent at building delicate equipment. These are Grakari, Braktok whispered. Free Grakari. Will you come with us? The rescue operation turned into a battle. Chromax ships tried to stop the evacuation, but Young-Ho's crew had learned from months of running Confederation blockades. They used asteroid fields as cover, sent false signals to confuse sensors, and moved too fast for the heavy Chromax ships to follow. By the time the shooting stopped, 3,000 Grakari were on their way to human space. Word of the rescue spread like fire through the galactic communication networks. Admiral Haewon Park, Taemin's sister, commanded the growing human fleet from her flagship Soul's Vengeance. Her job was getting harder every day. More species wanted human protection. More rebels needed supplies. More Confederation forces tried to stop them. Admiral, we have a problem, reported her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Woo Jin Nam. The Nautri are declaring independence. Haywan looked at the report. The aquatic Nautri had been builder cast for 3 millennia. They built underwater cities, space stations, anything the Confederation needed. But recently they had started building something else, schools. They want to teach philosophy to other species, Wu Jin continued. The Confederation is sending a full battle fleet to stop them. How many ships? 200 Chromax vessels, plus support from 5 other military caste species. Haywan felt a cold weight in her stomach. The human fleet had grown to almost 500 ships, but most were converted civilian vessels. Against a full Confederation battle fleet, they would be slaughtered. Send a message to Admiral Lee. Tell him we need to talk. The meeting took place on a neutral asteroid. Admiral Dong-Hyun Lee looked older than his years. The stress of protecting dozens of rebel species was wearing on him. We can't fight them directly, he said. Not yet, but we can't abandon the Nautari either. What do you suggest? Haywan asked. Dr. Kyung-Soo Lim, humanities chief strategist, spoke up. He was a thin, quiet man who had studied every galactic war for the past 1,000 years. We change the rules of engagement. Meaning, the Confederation fights set battles. Fleet versus fleet, strength against strength. They've done it the same way for centuries. But humans, we're good at finding new ways to solve old problems. Kyung-Soo's plan was crazy, dangerous, and completely against every rule of space warfare. Instead of meeting the Confederation fleet in open battle, humans would hit them where they weren't expecting. Captain Sung-Min Oh led the first attack. His modified cargo ship looked harmless, but it carried experimental weapons that So Young Kang had built. While the Confederation fleet was traveling to Nautari space, Sung-Min hit their supply convoy. The attack worked perfectly. Confederation. Doctrine said supply lines were safe behind the main fleet. No one had ever attacked them before. When Sung-Min's ship destroyed 3 fuel tankers and disappeared into hyperspace, the Chromax commanders didn't know how to respond. Commander Bo-Ra, Yu, struck next. Her squadron hit a Confederation communication relay, cutting off orders to the fleet. Then they attacked a shipyard, destroying vessels before they could join the battle. This is not how war is fought, General Tekmover raged during an emergency council meeting. There are rules, protocols. You attack the enemy's main force, not their support systems. Tell that to the humans, Elder Vex Thara replied. Her scales showed deep purple confusion. They seem unaware of proper military procedure. The confusion got worse when the real surprise came. Colonel Yoonji Lee didn't attack ships or stations. She attacked information. Her team of hackers and spies broke into Confederation computer systems. They stole files, copied records, and downloaded centuries of hidden data. What they found shocked even Yoonji. The sacred protocols weren't based on scientific study of species' abilities. They were designed to keep any race from becoming too powerful. The Confederation leaders had lied for 3,000 years. Look, at this, Yoonji showed the data to Ambassador Ji-On Kim. The original Volanthi weren't naturally better at making laws. They were the first species to develop faster-than-light travel. They used that advantage to conquer other races, then created the caste system to keep them under control. And the others? The Chromax weren't born warriors. They were farmers until the Volanthi gave them weapons and told them to enforce the new order. The Mendi used to be traders until they were forced to become healers. Every caste assignment was political, not natural. Ji-On felt her hands shake as she read the files. Billions of beings had lived and died believing they could only be what others told them to be. Entire species had forgotten their true history. We have to broadcast this, she said. The Confederation will call it lies, propaganda. Then we'll prove it's true. The transmission went out on every frequency humans could access. The stolen files were copied and sent to news networks, rebel groups, and underground organizations across the galaxy. Within hours, the truth was spreading faster than the Confederation could stop it. The reaction was explosive. On Volanthi Prime, young lawmakers demanded to know why they had been taught lies. On Chromax World, soldiers laid down their weapons and walked away from their posts. Mendi healers began treating worker caste patients for the first time in centuries. But the biggest change came from the worker caste species themselves. The Quarians stopped mining and started exploring space. The Zephyrians began building schools instead of factories. The Grakari formed their own government and declared independence. Supreme Lawgiver Quinthax watched his perfect galaxy crumble from his crystal tower on Nexus Prime. 3,000 years of order was collapsing in months. It was never supposed to be like this, he told Vexithara. The protocols kept peace. They prevented war. They prevented growth, Vexithara replied. Her scales had turned gray with shame. We told ourselves we were creating order, but we were just building a prison. What do we do? Before she could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Dozens of species were declaring independence. Rebel fleets were forming in every sector. The Great Confederation was splitting apart. We fight, General Tekmovar announced as he entered the chamber. We restore order, even if we have to destroy half the galaxy to do it. And if we lose? Quinthax asked. We won't lose. We have the strongest fleet in galactic history. The rebels have a few human ships and some converted cargo vessels. It's not even a real war. But Admiral Donghyun Lee had been studying Confederation tactics for months. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and their blind spots. When he received word that the Confederation was mobilizing for total war, he smiled grimly. Send a message to all human commanders, he ordered. Tell them it's time to show the galaxy what happens when someone tries to put freedom back in a cage. The greatest war in galactic history was about to begin. But it wouldn't be fought the way anyone expected, because humans had learned something the Confederation never understood. Rules were made by people. And what people made, people could unmake. The revolution had begun with words and ideas. Now it would continue with fire and steel, and somewhere, in human space, engineer So Young Kang was building weapons that would change warfare forever. The largest war fleet in galactic history moved through space like a metal storm. 10,000 Confederation ships in perfect formation, led by Supreme Commander Velderon of the Chromax. Behind the main fleet came support vessels, supply ships, and troop transports. It was a force that could conquer entire star systems. Admiral Donghyun Lee watched them come from his command ship deep in human space. His fleet looked pitiful in comparison, barely 500 vessels, most of them converted civilian ships. The smart move would be to surrender. The safe move would be to negotiate. Humans had never been smart or safe. Sir, they're demanding our surrender, reported Communications Officer Park Min-jung. Commander Velderon says we have 1 hour to submit to Confederation authority. Send a reply, Donghyun said. Tell him he can have our surrender when he takes it from our cold, dead hands. The reply that came back was a roar of rage that overloaded their speakers. Chromax weren't used to anyone defying them. Dr. Subin worked frantically in her laboratory ship. She wasn't building weapons. She was building something more dangerous. Information. Her team had analyzed Confederation tactics for months, looking for weaknesses. Admiral, I'm sending you the data, she transmitted. The Confederation fleet follows strict battle protocols. They form up in standard attack formations, approach at optimal speed, and engage at maximum weapons range. They've done it the same way for 1,000 years. And their weakness? They can't adapt. Their entire command structure is designed for predictable battles. If we do something unexpected, they won't know how to respond quickly. Admiral Donghyun Lee studied the tactical display. Traditional space warfare was like ancient naval battles. Big ships lined up and shot at each other until one side won. But humans had learned to fight differently on Earth. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, psychological warfare. Signal all ships, he ordered. Execute Plan Wolfpack. The human fleet didn't wait for the Confederation to reach them. Instead, they scattered in all directions, splitting into small groups that disappeared into hyperspace. Commander Velderon stared at his sensors in confusion. Where did they go? Unknown, Supreme Commander, his tactical officer replied. They've divided their forces and fled. Cowards. Set course for the human home system. We'll burn their worlds and end this rebellion. But as the Confederation fleet moved toward Earth, the first attacks began. Captain Sungmin Oh commanded a squadron of modified cargo ships that looked harmless on sensors. They dropped out of hyperspace behind the Confederation supply convoy and unleashed hell. The weapons engineer So Young Kang had built were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of traditional energy beams, they fired projectiles that phased through shields. Instead of trying to overpower Confederation defenses, they bypassed them completely. "Impossible," shouted the Chromax convoy commander as his ships exploded around him. "Their weapons can't penetrate our shields." "They're not penetrating," Sungmin replied over the communication channel. "They're going around. Humans don't break walls. We find doors." The attack lasted 15 minutes. When it was over, the Confederation's fuel supplies were gone and Sungmin's ships had vanished back into hyperspace. Commander Bo Ryu struck next. Her target wasn't ships or supplies, it was reputation. She attacked a Confederation propaganda station that broadcast news across the galaxy. "Citizens of the Confederation," she said, taking over their transmission. "Your leaders have lied to you for 3,000 years. The caste system isn't natural law. It's a control system designed to keep you obedient." Then she began broadcasting the stolen files that proved the truth about galactic history. Species across the galaxy watched in shock as their entire understanding of civilization crumbled. The psychological impact was devastating. Chromax soldiers began questioning their orders. Valanthi lawmakers demanded explanations from their leaders. Even military caste species started wondering if they wanted to fight for a system built on lies. But the worst attack came from Lieutenant Wu Jin Nam. His small fighter squadron didn't target the enemy fleet directly. Instead, they hit the Confederation's mobile command center. Wu Jin's ship was tiny compared to the massive Chromax dreadnought that served as fleet headquarters. But size didn't matter when you had weapons that ignored traditional physics. "Sir, we're detecting a single small craft approaching," reported the dreadnought's sensor officer. "One ship?" Commander Velderon laughed. "Destroy it." The dreadnought's massive guns fired, but Wu Jin's fighter wasn't there anymore. Human ships had learned to use short-range hyperspace jumps, appearing and disappearing faster than enemy weapons could track. "Where is it?" Velderon roared. "Behind us, sir." "No." "Above." "Wait, it's..." Wu Jin's ship materialized inside the dreadnought's shield perimeter and fired a single shot. The missile it carried wasn't designed to destroy the ship. Instead, it released an electromagnetic pulse that shut down every computer system on board. The flagship of the Confederation fleet went dark and began drifting helplessly through space. "This is impossible," Velderon screamed into his dead communicator. "You cannot defeat us. We have 10,000 ships." "You have 10,000 targets," came Wu Jin's reply over the backup radio. "We have 10,000 opportunities." The Confederation fleet tried to adapt, but their rigid command structure worked against them. Orders took hours to reach all ships. Formations that had worked for centuries fell apart when faced with enemies who refused to fight fair. Captain Yejin Park, Admiral Donghyun Lee's daughter, led the most daring attack of all. Her task force didn't target military vessels. They rescued prisoners. The Confederation had built prison stations throughout the galaxy, holding rebels and dissidents from dozens of species. Yejin's ships hit 3 stations simultaneously, freeing thousands of beings who had been locked up for demanding basic rights. "You're making a mistake," the Valanthi warden told her as his station was evacuated. "Without order, there will be chaos. Society will collapse." "Maybe," Yejin replied, helping a group of young Quarians board her ship. "But chaos with freedom is better than order with chains." The freed prisoners didn't just escape, they joined the rebellion. Former slaves became soldiers. Political dissidents became commanders. The human fleet grew with every rescue mission. Meanwhile, engineer So Young Kang worked around the clock to build new weapons and defenses. She had been studying the technology of every species in the galaxy, combining their innovations in ways the caste system had never allowed. Valanthi computers linked to Chromax armor to create personal shields. Mendi medical technology combined with Quarian strength enhancers to create super soldiers. Natari philosophy merged with human determination to inspire tactics no military academy had ever imagined. The humans are cheating, General Tekmovar complained during an emergency war council. They use non-standard weapons, unconventional tactics, and equipment that shouldn't exist. Then we adapt, Elder Vexthera said. Her scales showed the deep blue of depression. We learn from them. Impossible. We are military caste. We follow proven strategies, not experimental madness. And that's why we're losing, she replied quietly. The turning point came when Colonel Yoonji Lee achieved the impossible. She didn't just steal Confederation files, she stole an entire Confederation fleet. Her team of hackers had been studying Chromax computer systems for months, learning their command codes and security protocols. When the opportunity came, they acted. Attention Chromax 3rd Fleet. Came the transmission on official military channels. You are ordered to report to Sector 7 for special assignment. Maintain communication silence until further notice. The computer systems that should have verified the order had been quietly compromised weeks earlier. The 3rd Fleet, over 300 ships, jumped to the coordinates Yoonji provided and found themselves surrounded by human vessels. Chromax commanders, you have a choice, Admiral Haewon Park announced. Surrender and be treated with honor, or fight and be destroyed. We have disabled your weapons and communications. Your fleet is now under human control. Most of the Chromax ships surrendered without firing a shot. Their crews were war-weary and confused by months of fighting an enemy they couldn't understand. Many had seen the evidence about their history and wondered if they were fighting for the right side. The captured ships were turned over to rebel species who had joined the war. Suddenly, the human alliance had its own proper fleet, crewed by beings who understood both sides of the conflict. Supreme Commander Veldoran watched his perfect invasion turn into a disaster. His 10,000 ships were scattered across dozens of star systems, chasing ghosts and fighting shadows. His supply lines were in ruins. His command structure was falling apart. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral, his communication officer reported. Admiral Dong-hyun Lee appeared on the main screen, looking calm and confident. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed humans working alongside Quarians, Nautari, freed Grakari, and even some former Confederation species. Commander Veldoran, you came here to restore order. Instead, you've helped us prove that order built on lies cannot stand. Your fleet is broken. Your cause is lost. I'm offering you one chance to end this with honor. Never, Veldoran roared. The Confederation will never surrender to worker caste scum. Then you've chosen the hard way, Dong-hyun replied. Saddled 2 years after the Great War ended, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The Confederation was gone. But what replaced? It was messy, chaotic, and beautiful in ways the old order had never allowed. President Jae-hyun Kim, Ji-eun's younger brother, stood in the Assembly Hall of New Geneva, humanity's diplomatic capital. Around him sat representatives from over 200 species. Some wore the colorful robes of their former castes. Others had abandoned those symbols entirely. A few had created entirely new ways of dressing that mixed traditions from different worlds. The Galactic Alliance needs rules, argued Councillor Tekmara, a former Volanthi lawmaker. Without structure, we'll have chaos. We had structure before, replied Braktok, the Grakari who had become a philosopher. It was called oppression. Jae-hyun listened to the debate with mixed feelings. Creating a new government from the ruins of the old one was like trying to build a house while living in it. Every decision affected billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The biggest challenge wasn't the politics. It was the psychology. Most species had lived under the caste system for so long that they didn't know how to make choices for themselves. Dr. In-ho Jung worked with reformed Volanthi scientists in laboratories across the galaxy. Together they were developing technology that no single species could have created alone. Chromax armor enhanced with human engineering. Mendi medical knowledge combined with Quarian mineral expertise. Nautari philosophy merged with Zephyrian manufacturing techniques. This is remarkable, said Dr. Kelvana, a Volanthi researcher who had helped design the old caste system. We could have been doing this for thousands of years. But we didn't, In-ho replied. calibrating a device that used principles from 6 different species. We were too busy keeping everyone in separate boxes. I was too busy, Kilvana corrected herself. I helped build those boxes. I told myself we were maintaining order, but we were just afraid. Afraid of what? Of change. Of losing control. Of discovering that we weren't as special as we thought we were. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Not a mechanical one. The excited chittering of Dr. Klicktar, the young Zephyrian who had spoken up in the old Confederation Council. Dr. Jung, we've done it. The universal translator is working. Inho hurried to her station. The device before him was small, elegant, and impossible according to old Confederation science. It could translate any language in real time, even ones it had never heard before. How? He asked. I combined Valanthi computational systems with human pattern recognition and Zephyrian quantum mathematics, Klicktar explained proudly. 3 different ways of thinking about information, working together. The Confederation said cross-caste collaboration was impossible. The Confederation said a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Admiral Tae-Young Park, Tae-Min's cousin, tracked a growing threat from the outer rim. Some species couldn't adapt to freedom. The Chromax were struggling the most. Admiral, we're receiving reports of attacks on human colonies, Lieutenant Commander Sorochoy reported. The attackers are calling themselves the Neo-Confederation. Tae-Young studied the intelligence reports. War leader Thekmovar had survived the Great War and gathered followers who wanted to restore the old order. They were hitting soft targets, civilian stations, refugee camps, research facilities. They're not trying to win territory, Tae-Young realized. They're trying to prove that freedom doesn't work. The Neo-Confederation strategy was simple but effective. They attacked wherever the new alliance looked weak, then broadcast footage of the destruction. Their message was always the same. This is what happens when you abandon proper order. Some worlds began asking for Confederation-style protection again. Fear was a powerful weapon, and Thekmovar knew how to use it. The crisis came to a head when the Neo-Confederation attacked New Geneva itself. Thekmovar led the assault personally, bringing 300 ships against the lightly defended diplomatic world. Captain Yejin Park commanded the defense from her flagship, the Harmony's Edge. She had only 50 ships against overwhelming odds, but she had learned her father's lessons about unconventional warfare. Captain, they're demanding our surrender, her communications officer reported. War leader Thekmovar says the alliance experiment has failed. Tell him to come and prove it, Yejin replied. The battle that followed wasn't like the Great War. This time, both sides understood human tactics. Thekmovar had studied the defeats of his predecessors and developed counters to human strategies. But what he hadn't counted on was that humans weren't the only ones who had learned new ways to fight. Captain Zekthar, the Zephyrian whose children had died from the plague, led a squadron of former worker caste pilots. They used their ships like tools, precision instruments guided by minds that understood both construction and destruction. Commander Braktok brought Grakari warriors who had learned that strength could be subtle as well as overwhelming. Their ships moved like dancers, flowing around enemy fire instead of trying to absorb it. The aquatic Nautari had become masters of three-dimensional thinking, coordinating attacks from angles that land-based species never considered. This is impossible, Thekmovar roared as his formation fell apart. Worker caste species cannot fight like this. We're not worker caste anymore, Zekthar replied calmly. We're whatever we choose to be. The battle turned when unexpected reinforcements arrived. Ships from the old Confederation, crewed by former military caste species who had chosen to join the alliance. They had been Thekmovar's allies once, but they had seen what freedom could offer. Velandra, you betray your own caste. Thekmovar accused his former lieutenant. I serve my conscience, the Chromax female replied. Something you taught me to value before you forgot it yourself. The Neo-Confederation fleet broke apart and fled, but the damage was done. Doubt had been planted in minds across the galaxy. Was freedom worth the cost? Was chaos the price of choice? President Jae-hyun Kim addressed the Alliance Assembly the next day. The hall was packed with beings from hundreds of worlds, all wondering if their grand experiment was doomed to fail. War leader, Thekmover wants us to believe that freedom is dangerous, Jaehyun said. He's right. Freedom is dangerous. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But the alternative is worse. He gestured to the mixed crowd before him. Look around this room. Chromax sitting next to Grakari, Valanthi learning from Quarians, Zephyrians teaching Nautari. This would have been impossible under the old system. But at what cost? Called out a voice from the crowd. How many died in the war? How many suffer now from the chaos? Too many, Jaehyun admitted. Every death weighs on my conscience. But how many died slowly under the old system? How many lived their entire lives never knowing what they could have become? The debate continued for hours. Some species voted to return to Confederation-style protection. Others demanded complete independence. A few wanted to try something entirely new. In the end, they reached a compromise that would have been impossible under the rigid old system. The alliance would be voluntary. Species could join, leave, or maintain whatever level of involvement. They chose. There would be mutual defense agreements for those who wanted them, but no forced participation. It's not perfect, Jaehyun told his sister Jiun later. It might not even work. Nothing's perfect, she replied. But at least now we have the chance to make it better. Philosopher Sora Choi had spent months traveling the galaxy, talking to beings from every species about what they wanted their future to look like. Her conclusion surprised everyone. The old system failed because it assumed each species had one true nature, she explained to a gathering of alliance leaders. But the new system will fail too, if we assume everyone wants the same kind of freedom. What do you mean? Asked Dr. In-ho Jung. Some beings need structure to thrive. Others need chaos. Some want to explore the universe. Others want to perfect their homeworlds. Some think best alone. Others need community. So what's the answer? Choice. Real choice. Not just the freedom to be whatever you want, but the freedom to choose how much freedom you want. It was a radical idea. Instead of one galactic government, there would be many different systems, all cooperating and competing and learning from each other. The Chromax who couldn't adapt to chaos could build orderly worlds with clear hierarchies, as long as everyone there chose to participate. Species that thrived on competition could create merchant republics. Beings who valued contemplation could establish philosophical communes. It's like a garden, observed Counselor Tekmara, the former Valanthi lawmaker. Different plants need different conditions to grow. Exactly, Sora agreed. The old Confederation was like trying to grow everything in the same soil under the same light. No wonder most species withered. As the second year after the war ended, the galaxy was still changing. Former enemies became allies. Old friends discovered new disagreements. Species that had never met began trading, fighting, cooperating, and competing. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was dangerous. It was also alive in a way the galaxy hadn't been for 3,000 years. Admiral Dong Hyun Lee, now an old man, stood on the observation deck